To play Blue, Baby Blue, you have to go into the bathroom on your own. Turn off the lights and lock the door. Then you stare into the mirror, hold out your arms like you are rocking a baby, and repeat these words. Baby Blue, Baby Blue, 13 times without making a mistake. If you do it right, you will suddenly feel the weight of an invisible baby in your arms. The baby will get heavier and heavier as the baby grows larger and larger. You will feel it scratching your arms. Before it gets too heavy, you will have to quickly take the invisible baby, flush it down the toilet, and run out of the bathroom. If you don't do it fast enough, a hideous woman will appear in the mirror. She will yell, "Give me my baby back," and scream loud enough to break the glass. If you are still holding the baby, she will kill you. Some people believe that the woman is Bloody Mary, and she murdered her own child when she shattered a glass mirror and used a piece of broken glass to stab him to death. According to the urban legend, a group of girls found out about the Baby Blue story and decided to try it out. They didn't believe it would work, so they sent their friend Laura into the bathroom on her own. She turned the lights off and closed the door behind her. Laura put out her arms and started chanting the phrase, "Baby Blue, Baby Blue." All of a sudden, a baby appeared in her arms and began scratching her. Laura was scared out of her wits and had no idea what to do. She wanted to drop it and run, but she was afraid of what might happen. She stood there holding the invisible baby as it grew heavier and heavier. Suddenly, she caught a sight of something horrible in the bathroom mirror and screamed in terror. When Laura's friends heard her screaming, they tried to open the bathroom's door, but it was locked. Finally, they managed to run to a friend's house to get help. When they broke open the door, they found Laura lying dead on the bathroom floor. Her eyes had been scratched out. They couldn't move her body because something large and invisible was pinning her to the ground. There was once a 19-year-old Korean girl named Haruko who was attending university in a large city. One night, she had to stay late in the library to finish a project, and it was almost dark by the time she returned home. Haruko lived on the 14th floor of her apartment building. She stood in the entrance and pressed the button to call the elevator. She always hated coming home so late in the evening. It just didn't feel safe. When the elevator came, she stepped inside and pushed the button to her floor. Just as the doors were about to close, a handsome man came running up. The man was out of breath and put out his hand to stop the door closing. Then he stepped into the elevator and stood beside her. "You live on the 14th floor?" he asked, seeing the button lit up. "Yes," replied Haruko. "Oh," said the man, smiling, "I live on the 13th. As the elevator ascended, he pressed the button for 13. Through the windows in the elevator door, Haruko watched the floors go by as they both stood in silence. She stole a few glances at the man. He was certainly handsome. She wondered if he would ever be interested in dating her. When he happened back to look at her, she batted her eyelids and smiled sweetly at him. Just then, the elevator stopped on the 13th floor. The doors opened and the man stepped out. "See you later," he said. "Yes, see you," replied Haruko. As the doors of the elevator were closing behind him, the man suddenly turned around, pulled out a sharp knife out of his jacket and said in a menacing voice, "Upstairs." Then, laughing like a maniac, he ran towards the staircase. The girl was terrified, but before she could do anything, the doors shut and the elevator began to ascend. She began to panic. Desperately, she hammered the button with her fist, trying to get the elevator to stop, but it was no use. When it reached the 14th floor and the doors opened, the man with the knife was already standing there, waiting for her. In Korea, people say that this is a real story. The girl was found dead, stabbed to death in the elevator. People say that the worst part was not the death itself, but rather the sheer horror she experienced in between those two floors when she was in the elevator and knew she was going to die. They claim that this is the reason that all elevators now have a stop button. Remember to like, comment, subscribe. Thank you. There was a young woman who was getting married to the man of her dreams. Her wedding was approaching, and she wanted to look her very best. People were always telling her that she looked very pale, so she was determined to get a good tan before her wedding. The woman went to a tanning salon near her house and tried to book an hour on the sunbed. The staff at the salon told her that, for her own safety, she could only tan for 30 minutes at a time. After the sessions, she looked in the mirror and found that her skin wasn't any darker. When she attempted to make an appointment for another 30 minutes on the tanning bed the next day, the staff informed her that she could only tan twice a week. After her second session, the woman still wasn't satisfied with the results. Fearing that, at this rate, she would never have a proper tan, the woman came up with a cunning plan. If the salon could give her only 30 minutes, then she would book appointments in every tanning salon in her city, one after another. She spent the next 4 days going from one tanning salon to the other, laying on sunbed after sunbed. Even though her skin was beginning to get a little dark, she was worried that it wouldn't be brown enough by the day of her wedding. She hoped that this would help tan her skin to a lovely golden brown. She slathered the tanning lotion all over her body, letting it soak in. Then she set off her tanning bed appointments. Later that day, at the tanning salon, the staff noticed that the smell of burning was in the air. When they went to investigate, they were horrified to find one of the tanning beds on fire. After putting out the flames, all that was left on the tanning bed was the charred body of the unfortunate woman. When the autopsy was performed, the coroner discovered that the woman's internal organs had been cooked from the inside out. By combining the tanning lotion and the sunbed, she had literally cooked herself alive. The Hook, or the Hookman, is a scary urban legend about a boyfriend and girlfriend who park in a deserted lover's lane one late night. One summer night, a teenage boy was going out on a date with his new girlfriend. He picked her up at her house, and they drove out to the edge of town. They parked the car in a secluded spot that was well known as Lover's Lane. As they glazed out at the lights of the town, the boy put his arm around the girl and switched the car radio on so they could listen to some romantic music. He leaned over, and the young couple began kissing and cuddling. Just as they were getting in the mood, The music suddenly stopped, and a newsreader's voice came on the radio. "This is an emergency announcement. Earlier tonight, a crazed murderer escaped from the mental asylum. Police are warning citizens to be on their guard since the patient is considered dangerous and armed. The insane killer is nicknamed the Hookman because, after he lost his right hand in an accident, it was replaced with a steel hook. Everyone in the area should be on the lookout for a man fitting his description. If you see anything suspicious, you should report it to the police immediately." The girl became frightened and asked the man to be taken home. She knew that the state insane asylum wasn't far from the Lover's Lane. She was also worried that the remote area where they were parked was the perfect spot for a deranged madman to lurk. The boy was feeling brave and assured his girlfriend that they were perfectly safe. He locked all of the car doors, then tried to kiss her again. The girl became frantic and pushed him away, insisting that they leave immediately. In a huff, the boy slammed the car into gear and spun its wheels as he pulled out of the parking space. On the way back to town, they both calmed down, but the girl still held on tightly to her boyfriend. When they pulled up outside the girl's house, the boy got out of the car and walked around to open the door for his girlfriend. For a long time, he just stood there, staring at the door. At first, the girl couldn't figure out what was wrong. Then she realized that her door was still locked. She smiled and unlocked it. Still, the boy stood there. The girl was puzzled and rolled down her window. Then she saw that the boy was staring down at the door handle. Slowly, she looked down herself and began to scream uncontrollably. There, hanging from the door handle, was a bloody stainless steel hook. The videotape is a scary urban legend about a cursed VHS video cassette. It is said that if you watch the tape, you will die within 48 hours. They say that the cursed videotape in the movie The Ring was based on this urban legend. Years ago, there was a group of 3 girls who went to a high school together. They were all best friends, and one night, during the summer holidays, they decided to have a sleepover party. They spent all day planning their sleepover, and because they were horror fans, they decided to rent a scary movie. It was late at night when the 3 girls piled into a car and drove down to their local video rental store. But it was closed. The girls spent the next half hour driving around town, looking for a video store that was still open. Eventually, they found a little shop that was located on a side street and went inside. The girls could not agree on a film to rent, so one of them went over to the woman behind the counter and asked if she had any suggestions. The woman told her that she had just the thing for them and disappeared into the black room. While they were waiting, one of the girls noticed a videotape lying on the counter. It didn't have a box cover or a label, and it seemed to be very dirty and stained. She was curious to see what it was and reached to pick it up. Just then, the woman came rushing out from the back room and slammed her hand down on the tape, pulling it away. With a strange smile on her face, she said, "That's not something you girls should be watching." When they asked her what it was, the woman told them not to touch it, and all she would say was that it was a home movie. Then she handed them an old horror film and told them it would be much better for them to watch this. Eventually, the girls agreed to rent the tape that the woman suggested. While she was in the back room searching for the film, one of the girls took the opportunity to swipe the mysterious videotape and stuff it into her purse. Later that night, when the girls returned home, the girl who stole the videotape took it out of her purse and convinced the other two that they should watch it. They put the tape in the video recorder and pressed play. All of a sudden, the power went out and the room was plunged into darkness. However, the television was still on. With a crackle of static, the video started playing, and on the screen, they saw a woman tied to a wooden stake. She was surrounded by angry men and women who carried burning torches. They were shouting and spitting on her, and then they set fire to the wood beneath the woman's feet. The woman began laughing maniacally, and the people yelled out things like, "Burn the witch," and "This is your punish for practicing black magic." As the flames rose higher and higher, licking at the woman's face, she screamed out a curse, saying that all who witness her death will suffer the same fate in 2 days' time. There was a screech of static, and the VCR began making skipping sounds before it suddenly cut off. The terrified girls sat in the dark for a long time until the power came back on. They tried to convince each other that it must have been some type of prank. After a while, they agreed that they should return the tape immediately. When they arrived at the location of the video store, it was gone. All they found was an abandoned building and an empty lot. 2 days later, all 3 of the girls were dead. The first girl was found floating in a swimming pool. Her body was burned beyond recognition. The charred remains of the second girl was discovered in the middle of a park, and the third girl's body was found in a furnace. When the police were investigating the mysterious death, they thought it was a very strange coincidence that all 3 girls had been burned to death on the same day. In each case, the police thought it had been a spontaneous combustion, but the weirdest thing about it was that nothing around them had even been signed by the flames. They found a trash can outside of the house of one of the girls. It had been set on fire and was burned out. Everything in it was destroyed, except for a videotape, which had been inexplicably left untouched by the flames. Futakuchi Onna, or the Two-Mouthed Woman, is an urban legend about a woman who is cursed with having 2 mouths, one normal mouth at the front and another hidden, monstrous mouth in the back of her head. Futakuchi Onna is a monstrous woman with a tiny mouth. However, on the back of her head, hidden beneath her hair, she has a huge second mouth. The woman's skull splits apart, revealing lips, teeth, and a tongue. Although she appears to never eat, the mouth in the back of her head is ravenous and consumes huge quantities of food. They say that the mouth has a mind of its own and speaks to the woman, mumbling spiteful and threatening things to her. The mouth will harass the woman and threaten her, demanding food. It will screech obscenely and cause the woman tremendous pain until it is fed. The monstrous woman can also control the woman's hair, making it snake out like tentacles, grabbing food and shoveling it down its throat. There is some disagreement in Japan as to Futakuchi Onna's origins and how she got her second mouth. One story from Japanese folklore tells of an old miser who lived by himself in a small village. He never got married because he hated spending money. He thought that if he took a wife, he would have to pay for her food, and he could not bear the idea of parting with his wealth. It so happened that he came across a young woman who did not eat a thing, and immediately asked her to marry him, because she seemed to never eat and was a hard worker. The old miser was thrilled that he had found the woman of his dreams, and the couple were very happy together. However, he began to wonder why his stores of rice were steadily decreasing. One day, the old man pretended to leave for work, but instead stayed behind to spy on his new wife. To his horror, he saw his wife's hair part on the back of her head, her skull split wide open, revealing a gaping, deformed mouth. Her hair reached out like tentacles, grasping handfuls of rice and shoveling it into the monstrous mouth. When the woman noticed her husband had discovered her secret, she attacked him and tried to strangle him. He managed to get away and hide in the mountains. Weeks later, when he worked up the courage to return, he found that the woman had gone and all of his stores of rice had been eaten. The man never married again. In another story, a man's wife died, leaving him with a daughter to care for. The man remarried, but his wife was a very mean and vindictive person. Together, they had a second child, another daughter. However, they were poor and there was barely enough food to go around. The new wife decided to keep her own daughter fed while she starved the other girl. The man's daughter eventually died of starvation. Not long after, the man was out in the garden chopping wood for the fire. He accidentally swung his axe incorrectly and embedded it in the back of his new wife's head. There was a lot of blood, and he expected the woman would die. She survived, but the open wound would never heal. Instead, it formed into a huge, drooling mouth, complete with teeth and a tongue. The woman was in tremendous pain, and the only way to make it stop was to feed the deformed mouth. It demanded more and more food to keep it satisfied. Eventually, the mouth began making sounds and started talking. One day, while the woman was asleep, the hideous mouth spoke to her husband and confessed, "I am cursed because I killed your daughter by starving her to death." The Death Cab is a spooky urban legend from Argentina about a taxi that is said to lurk outside the cemeteries, waiting for an uninviting victim to step inside so it can take them on a chilling journey to their doom. In Argentina, there is an urban legend that has spread by word of mouth. People take taxis every day. It's something you do almost without thinking. If it is late or it is raining, you might hail a cab to take you to your destination. However, in Argentina, they say that you should never hail a cab outside a cemetery. If you do, you may unknowingly be stepping into the dreaded death cab. Legend has it that this supernatural taxi of death lurks outside cemeteries, waiting for an unwitting victim to get inside. As the story goes, a young Argentina woman named Claudia was on her way home one night. She had left work quite late, and it was raining heavily. She was too tired to walk all the way to her apartment, so she decided to take a taxi home instead. As she walked down the lonely street that led past the cemetery, she suddenly saw a taxi coming towards her. She held out her hand and hailed the taxi. When it stopped, she climbed in and gave the driver her address. Sitting in the back seat, wiping the rain from her brow, she suddenly began to feel very cold, much colder than she had ever felt before. Looking around, she noticed that the windows were covered with ice. It was then that she realized they were going the wrong way. She was about to say something to the driver when she caught the sight of his hands on the steering wheel. His skin was pale and leathery, and his fingers were almost skeletal. She couldn't see his face in the rearview mirror. "We're going the wrong way," she blurted out. The driver didn't answer. He just kept on driving as if he had heard nothing. When she raised her hand to touch his shoulder, the driver quickly turned his head. Claudia screamed in horror. His face looked like a corpse. The skin was withered and clung tightly to the bones. She tried to open the back door and jump out, but the door handle came off in her hands. She tried to pull the window down, but the button didn't work. She saw a young couple walking down the street, so she shouted to them and banged on the window, trying to attract their attention. They didn't hear. The taxi continued on its way, seemingly unstoppable. Claudia became frantic, desperate to escape. She attacked the driver and tried to scratch his face with her nails. His rotten skin came off in her hands, revealing the gleaming skull underneath. The taxi began to speed up, going faster and faster along the rain-soaked city streets. Claudia looked behind her, and on the back window she saw a sign that read, "Prepare to die." Claudia was never seen again. No one knows for certain whether or not this urban legend is true. The only ones who know for sure are the ones who have been kidnapped by the death cab, and they can never tell us what happened to them. But just in case, take care. And if you're walking by a cemetery, never, ever call a cab. There was a male student who often studied in the university library. He would stay there studying in the evenings until it closed. Then he would walk back to his dorm room. Every night, on the way back to the dormitories, he passed a small park and he always saw a young girl sitting on a swing. Finally, one night, he decided to go up to her and started talking with her. From that time on, he would always talk to her for a while before going back to his dorm. Later, when he told his friends about the girl, they asked him to describe her. They told him that the young girl he described looked almost exactly the same as a teacher's daughter who had died in a traffic accident. They said that the teacher's daughter had lost her little finger. The student was very curious and wanted to know whether the girl was missing her little finger. So, the next night, when he spoke to the girl, he asked if he could see her hand. The girl thrust out her hand, and when the boy saw that her little finger was missing, he ran away in terror. Later, he always went by the park in the evenings, but the swing was always empty, and he never saw the girl again. Remember to like, comment, subscribe. Thank you.